Let's go back to the Skype machine and say hello to the man who will meet Dan Hooker in February in Auckland, New Zealand. The great Paul Felder, kind enough to join us via his car. Paul, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you coming on. You're such a big shot these days on TV, all over the place, traveling the world. I feel like you're a little too big for us.
Not at all, man. Come on. This is the show to be on.
Oh, I appreciate that. First, let me ask you about this past Saturday in D.C. That was a very emotional show, and I know it was very personal for you. With all the talk about Cancer Foundation, personal with your father, D.C. Both of you sitting right next to each other. Was that a particularly difficult broadcast to be a part of, considering how much of a personal tie you have to that horrible disease?
Yeah. It was one of those things I didn't really know how I was going to react to it, but then sitting next to DC, who just went through it more recently with his father in August, and Stuart Scott and everything, and just thinking about my aunt who I've lost, my first Muay Thai coach who I also lost to pancreatic cancer, the same as my father. It was rough, but it's good, man. It's good to raise awareness and be a part of that, and I'm glad that the UFC was getting involved the way they did and kind of dedicating that night to it. Even though it was the last show I'm going to call before I go into training camp, I'm glad that that's the note that I got to end on, thinking about my father, and that's the perfect fuel I need to get geared up. So it was a special night.
And I thought all of you involved did a phenomenal job. So kudos to you. I know it was tough, but I thought you all did really great and hit all the right notes as far as trying to talk about it personally, but also on a bigger scale. Now, you mentioned your fight coming up. Before I ask you about that, let me just ask you two things about Saturday. Number one, was that an early stoppage in the main event, or do you agree with it?
I just worry, man. What would have happened to that man's lip? God
Yeah.
forbid he took more shots to the face, but it was really close, and I feel horrible for Overeem because he was seconds away from pulling off a decision over one of the more dangerous guys that have kind of burst on the scene in this division. So yeah, it might have been a tad early, considering that Rosenstrike walked away. He should have went in, and I feel like Big Dan would have definitely jumped in, and it might have only been a second left. But if he even looked like he was going in for another shot, I feel like it would have ended. But since he kind of gave him that space, I feel like he should have just let Reem stand up, and even though he was hurt, he could have walked away with that decision. But that lip, oh man, look at that thing.
Horrible. And what about, speaking of Big Dan, what about how he handled the Struve Rothwell fight? He shouldn't have given him that advice, right? I mean, that's unacceptable as a referee, correct?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We talked about it on the broadcast. You can't let a fighter know, I think you're winning. That's
Yeah.
your job. Your job is to say, here's how much time is left in the round. Here's how much time you have on stoppage time to recover from the groin strike. You can't influence that. And, that whole thing was, I don't think any of it was intentional. It's all unfortunate. I feel horrible for Stefan Struve, and Big Ben's just trying to do his job, and it slipped up, and he lost the point, and that's what you have to do. But as far as Big Dan, he should have said, listen, I'm taking a point. That's all he needs to know. That's all that fighter needs to know. It's up to him if he can continue on in that fight. It's not the ref's job to say, I think you're up.
Yeah. It has not been a very good last few months for Big Dan, but hey, we'll hear from Stefan later on in the program. Now let's talk about you. Is it true that you went to Auckland for 24 hours to do the promotional stuff with Dan Hooker and then flew back home? That can't be right. I mean, this stare down, I want to ask you about this specifically in a second, but is it true you went there for 24 hours?
It was a little more than 24 hours. So I flew in, I guess, a little before 8 a.m. their time in Auckland. Went right into media, had phone interviews, on-camera interviews, a whole bunch of stuff on their Tuesday, our Monday. And Wednesday morning is when we did all this stare down stuff and more media and more photo op. And then I left at 8 p.m. that night.
Oh my gosh. Was it exhausting?
Yeah, it was extremely exhausting, but it's exactly what I wanted and I need it, man. That talking about the fight and having that stare down with Dan just motivated me to get back home and get to training and getting this training camp started. That got me pumped up.
Now, what about that stare down? What did you make of it?
Thought it was great. That's not my style normally to be aggressive, but when somebody's going to confront me the way that he did and kind of have his hands down and get in my face, I'm the type of guy, I'm not going to go out of my way to talk trash or demean you or do anything like that. But I am a fighter, and I'm a hard nosed one like that. So if you're going to come at me like that with aggression, I'm going to come right back in your face. I'm not going to back down. So I think it's good. This stuff's for the fans. This is to get people wanting to see this fight, and I think me and Dan did that. I think we got people interested to tune into this matchup.
Now, the stare down got a lot of play, but as far as I'm concerned, and it's something that kind of flew under the radar, he gave you the old shoulder bump there. Did you see that when you guys were turning? We didn't have it on the clip there. Well, I mean, that to me, that was touching right there. That was a little bit of that was more aggressive than the stare down. How did you feel about that?
Hey, man, listen. If you've got to resort to that, what's going on in your head when
Oh,
you've got to shove after a stare down? You know what I mean? I didn't touch him. I didn't put one hand on him, not one finger. I'm gonna do all my touching on Dan on fight night. When I'm using my fist, elbows, and knees. I don't look too much into that kind of stuff. It didn't bother me. It didn't hurt me. That's for sure. It was just
sure.
a little extra elbow on the side. So I'll just have to give him one back on the 22nd/23rd.
Any other run-ins with him while you were there?
I mean, we were around each other that whole day, talking to the cameras and things like that. But he didn't have much to say, and that's fine. We're fighting at the end of the day. We don't have to be best friends. But I do feel, even though obviously we got some blood. Our blood is boiling for each
Yeah.
other right now. We want to get in there. We are both on the cusp of really moving towards that top five and getting a much bigger fight. So I think that's where it's all coming from. I don't think it's necessarily animosity towards each other, but listen, we're standing in each other's way to move towards, a fight that could potentially put us in line for a title shot.
And of course, this one has like a year history with you being in the cage after one of his wins, and him essentially calling you out while you're working as an analyst, which is a fun scene. There, you see the screen grab from. I mean, that's just lovely right there. A little bit of a different mood than the stare down. Have you been impressed with him though? What he's done in particular this particular year, coming off of the Barbosa loss. What have you thought of him?
I think he's getting much, much better. His timing is great. He's got knockout power that he's shown, and to take out a guy like Ali Aquinta, who's as tough as they come, that's a statement. That's the one that impressed me. I mean, Vic had been on a skid, so getting past him, that's not overly impressive. Even though he's tall, he's hard to deal with. But like that fight there, Dorino Burns, that's a big win, and I think the Ali Aquinta wins are the ones that I'm going to really study and take a look at.
Was there any talk of the Barbosa fight happening again with all the aftermath? Was there any talk of that?
Not from the UFC. I put it out there that it was something we'd be interested in for 5 rounds. We wanted it to be a main event. I really hate how all that kind of went down. It was a crazy great fight, and people are talking about all the controversy and all that. Listen, I don't care. It's not my freaking job to judge fights. I go in there, I lay it on the line, and I pressured him. I feel like I was starting to break him in the third round, and if there was 4 or 5 rounds in this fight, I think it could have been over. But I know he's gone on some of the posts about me and Hooker having this main event and putting like crying, laughing faces and things like that, and I don't know if that's Edson or his manager or what it is, but yeah, it's all nonsense.
You're a little annoyed at this point of it. You just want to move on.
Yeah, of course, I wanted to either move on or have that fight again. But if I'm given the opportunity to take a different matchup and switch up who I'm fighting, I'm going to take it. I don't, I'm not dying to have a third fight with that guy. We beat the crap out of each other when we go in there. So, let's take a little break. It's not something that's off the table in the future. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that it's something that won't happen.
And I'm just I know this is somewhat of a cliche question, but to finally get your first UFC main event, does it feel any different? Did you perk up when you heard that? I know you were antsy to get back in there, and you don't like to take a lot of time off, but to hear, wow, like they, that they like you. You're on the broadcast team. You don't need that sort of vote of confidence, but to be put in a main event spot against a New Zealander, right, a Kiwi in New Zealand, this is a big deal. How did you react to that?
I pumped out of my mind, man. It still seems not real. As we get closer to the fight and there's more advertisement going on for it, I think it'll set in. But yeah, I was stoked out of my mind. It's something I've been calling for a long time, but now I feel like I finally deserve it. We've put in a long time in the UFC, 5 years now. This would be my 14th fight. I've had a couple co-main spots, that co-main on a pay-per-view, and I faced some of the best guys in this division, and so has Booker at this point. So I feel like we finally really put our work in to earn this spot, and it was the perfect opportunity. People are like, how do you feel about going down to New Zealand? And it's like, look, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's 5 rounds. I'm the featured. We're the featured fight of that night, and that's what I want. To get that main event spot is why we do this, right? I mean, as much as we want the money and we want the belt, to get there, you've got to prove that you can kind of headline an event and get people interested in you.
And so at this point, you get by Hooker. Do you feel like you'll finally be in that conversation? Is this the fight that gets you to where you want to be, or do you feel like you're still a couple away?
I think I'm at least one away for sure at that point. I feel like we're 6-7. If I beat the seventh guy, unless some things in the division really get screwed up, and they need somebody to step in, you're definitely putting yourself in that spot. You're the guy they're going to call if the division is mixed up. But I feel like it sets me up for a huge fight against somebody in the top five, probably another main event or a huge spot on a pay-per-view. And if you get past whoever that is, then I feel like I'm truly in line for a title fight. And at that point, I would be seven wins in a row at lightweight minus the Mike Perry loss at 170.
Yeah. And how far in advance, by the way, do you go to New Zealand for the fight to get acclimated? I heard it's like a day for every hour time difference. Are you going to go that far in advance?
Yeah, that's what I also heard that too. I was thinking that. So that would be about 18, 19 days for me. That's a
Gosh.
little far because here's the problem, right? You've got to weigh the situation here, because if I go 18, 19 days out, yes, I'll be 100% acclimated by the time I fight, but I can't bring Duke 19 days out from the fight. He's got a gym that he's running. He's got other fighters. He's got a corner, other people, UFC athletes. I can get him there that whole week. I'm going to go at least 10 days early with a couple of my teammates, get an Airbnb, bring my nutritionist with me, keep my weight on point, keep training hard. I probably have whenever my last sparring day will be, I'll leave right after that. But do I go early and lose the training, or do I keep the training solid and then, figure out ways to kind of adapt? I've done it before. I've been overseas and fought before. Um, so hopefully I'll be able to figure that out, but I'm thinking 10 days.
And by the way, congrats on the new contract. How many fights?
4 fights.
How many were left?
1.
One.
This would have been my last fight on the deal.
Okay, so they re-upped you. Are you happy?
100% happy. Yeah, thrilled. It didn't take long. My manager talked to Shelby, and within a day we had this deal. So I was very impressed and felt like I was getting taken care of, and they respected what we wanted, and we ended exactly in the situation that I wanted to be. I didn't want to have an extensive contract as far as the number of fights, because then people don't realize. Let's say I go on a good run here, it's longer before I negotiate, right? So the
Yeah.
shorter you can keep the contract and get what you want, and uh, then the chances of renegotiating and have another short contract. And by then, honestly, after this contract into another one, I don't see many more contracts coming my way, Ariel.
Right. This is the time, right? This is the time to strike.
Yeah, this is it. This contract is huge for me as far as setting myself up, making good money, and putting myself in the title picture. And then if things don't go that way, we'll see where we are at the end of this contract. But I have no problem stepping away from this sport either.
Well, so you think that this is like, it could be these 4 fights, do or die?
Oh yeah. Oh, easily. Yeah.
Wow. That's the mindset. That's a lot of pressure to put on oneself.
Or you can look at it the other way, and it's like, look, this is my chance. I got my contract. I've got the fight I want. I got a main event. Things are lining up to get what I want. I've just got to go in there and pull it off.
Right.
That's the easy part. Go in there and fist fight, right? It's getting all this stuff and negotiating and getting the main events and getting people hyped about you. That's the hard part, and I've put in that time, and I've been broadcasting, and it's not even because of the broadcasting that I'd be retiring. I know people are saying that, but in April, I'll be 36. And, my whole thing was I hadn't taken much damage. Oh, I hadn't taken much damage. I started my career late. Well, at this point, that's not true anymore, is it?
Right. Well, you're in a good spot. Hopefully your Eagles have a big victory tonight, Monday Night Football against the
Can you believe that we could
Yes.
still possibly win this division?
Yes.
It's like, what happens then? So go Birds. I'm still going to watch it tonight.
Against the hapless Giants. And I know you're still lamenting the fact that you didn't win the Nose World Order Championship back in June, but don't worry, we're still going, and you will get another crack at it, okay? I just want to let you know.
Thank God. Thank God.
right.
I've been losing sleep over that one.
I know. I heard. Congrats on the new deal, Paul, and good luck in training camp. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on as always, Ariel.
There he is, the man, Paul Felder. Irish Dragon returns on February 22nd here in the U.S., February 23rd, of course, in New Zealand against Dan Hooker. What a phenomenal main event that is. Hello, everyone. It's Ariel Helwani. I just came here to thank you for watching our ESPN YouTube channel. It's the best. You know what else is the best? The ESPN app. You can get highlights, analysis, all that stuff and more. And if you want premium content and live streaming sports, there's only one place for all of that. It's ESPN Plus.